Thank you very much, worship team. As I've been reading Ephesians, I have more and more thought, what's the background of this book? Why was Paul writing? And especially when I read phrases like, you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, in the futility of their mind, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from life of God, because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart, who being past feeling have given themselves over to lewdness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. And then he says again, put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to deceitful lusts. He says you were once in darkness. And then he says it's shameful to even speak of the things which were done by them in secret. So I've been wondering, what's the background to this story? You know that the temple of Diana, or Artemis, was there at Ephesus, and it was the largest building in the Greco-Roman world at that time. 115 meters by 55 meters, larger than a football field. The pillars were 20 yards or 60 feet high. In the altar in the center of that temple, hundreds of animals could be sacrificed at one time there. It was also used as a bank. One of the largest hoards of ancient coins were found in the foundation of where that was. It was a place of refuge, a sanctuary church. And it was filled with works of art from all over the world. You notice the queen bee there. We'll get into that a bit later. Now, all that's left of it is this column, and it's not a whole column. It's been put together by pieces of column that have been found. Remember, Albert Eamon said he'd been there and seen this. This is the goddess that was worshipped there. She was called Diana. She was at Ephesus. There was a unique twist to this goddess. She wasn't worshipped the same way in the rest of the Greek Roman world as she was here. One of the stories is that it's Amazons, you know, those female warriors who founded this city. She is supposed to be the twin to Apollo, the god Apollo. She was supposed to have been born 9 days earlier, and she actually helped in her brother's birth. Now, you may say, well, she was a baby. In Greek and Roman thinking, often gods were born as adults. And so she was looked at as a helper for birth. She was served by maidens of high rank and many, many eunuchs. In her worship, the women would dress in their finest to go and worship, and they would also bring dresses and stuff to put on the idol. And I saw this in Japan, one idol in particular, where people would bring clothing to put on the idol, and the priests had to come every hour or so and take off the clothing so that new clothes could be put on. It was felt that this goddess had the power to bring life or end life. She was looked at as a midwife. She was the champion of virgins, female and male. But one of the interesting things is that at that time, the life expectancy for women was 25 to 30 years. I've been doing some history on my family and where I grew up, and I remember that there were many women who died in childbirth, and so I have grandfathers who were married 3 times because their first 2 wives died. And so this was very common in the world at that time. And if you remember in Acts, there was a big fuss about this. This temple was also a place, the city was a place where people came and bought idols, mementos of the worship of Diana, silversmiths. Now, apparently, everything wasn't just silver. There were some people who just put together very crude clay things, and they've found these around, and people would buy them and take them home, and they paid exorbitant prices for this. Remember a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Diana, and it says he brought no small profit to the craftsmen. Then he says, men, you know that we have our prosperity by this trade. The city of Ephesus was a very prosperous city because people came from all around to come to that temple. They made amulets that were used for childbirth, and they made copies of the temple and of the idol. The temple of the great goddess Diana, if Paul keeps on preaching, may become despised and her magnificence may be destroyed. She is Diana, whom all Asia and the world worshipped. And remember, when the riot broke out, they started shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." It's sort of like in the Islamic world today, where people start shouting, "Allah is great," and they keep it up for hours. Then they moved into the Colosseum, one of the largest and best preserved Colosseums around, and they shouted for 2 hours more, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." Now, Timothy pastored at Ephesus, not our Timothy, but Timothy, because much of the focus of the worship of Diana was for and to women. And Paul writes to Timothy, making several statements that help us understand why he wrote those epistles when we look at the background. Timothy says, "In like manner also, that women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly clothing." I mentioned it was their habit to really dress up when they went to the temple, but God doesn't really look at how we dress. That doesn't mean we just dress whatever we want, but it's not our clothing that's going to make him pay attention. "I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. Nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, holiness, and self-control." The worship of the goddess Diana involved putting women first. Remember, it was the Amazons who founded the city, probably. There were bees all over this idol, and in the coins there were bees. The idea of a queen bee, the one who fertility comes to for the whole tribe. The males were just drones that looked after the queen. So the whole of that city was really, women were dominant. So this is why Paul is writing this. Now, believe it or not, the worship of Diana is prevalent in our world today. She got mixed up with the moon goddess. She's also looked at as Mother Nature, neo-paganism. And as I was looking online, I found site after site where you can buy these kind of amulets. The worship of Diana is alive and well in our world today, particularly in Europe, neo-paganism, but it's also taking over in America, the idea of feminism. If you've been looking at what's happening, female vice president may be on the line, and as I listen, she's looked at as probably the next president because Biden may not make it through. The prominence of women, and behind all of this is that ancient idea of the goddess Diana of Ephesus. And so as you read Ephesians, as you read Timothy, and as you read into Revelation about Ephesians, keep in mind the background of this city.